On the outside, he's very charismatic, so it seems very loving, and she loves him, and I know that. And
I said, this guy is creeping me out. I remember those were my exact words, because his temper, you could feel it.
We drove by and the gentleman was slapping the girl.
He was slapping her?
Yes, and then we stopped. They ran up and down the sidewalk. He proceeded to hit her, hopped in the car, and they drove off.
We've been lucky so far at all the places we've stayed, but I'd say this is one of the best so far.
As children, we're warned to fear strangers in the dark, but the sad truth is we're far more likely to be harmed by those closest to us. The shadowy figures of our nightmares might very well be the same people we share a bed with at night. Though violence of any nature can be unexpected and scary, when it is the person you should trust most in the world, it is particularly insidious. This was tragically true for Gabby Petito, a free-spirited young woman who vanished during a cross-country road trip with her fiancé in July 2021, never to return home. The oldest child of Nicole Schmidt and Joseph Petito, Gabrielle Venora Petito, was born in 1999. Artistic and whimsical, she was described by those closest to her as sweet, free-spirited, and selfless. Growing up on Long Island, in the idyllic town of Blue Point, New York, Gabby graduated from Bayport Blue Point High School in 2017. During high school, she first encountered Brian Laundrie, another Long Island native. According to friends, the pair dated intermittently throughout their teens, and though they fought, sometimes bitterly, no physical violence between them was ever witnessed. The only son of Roberta and Christopher Laundrie, Brian came off as smooth, logical, and level-headed. After Gabby's graduation, the pair broke up for some time, but rekindled their romance in March 2019. This time around, things were more serious from the start, leading Gabby to move into the Laundrie family home in Northport, Florida, a quiet town on the Gulf Coast. A few months later, in July 2020, Brian proposed to Gabby, and she enthusiastically accepted, posting an image of the two of them on her Instagram profile, captioned, "You make life feel unreal, and every day is such a dream with you." Brian seemed equally smitten, sharing the words, "My biggest fear is that one day I'll wake up and it will have all been a dream, because that is what every second has felt like since we found each other, till death do us part, or until I wake up. I'm so happy the answer was yes. Love you, honey." Though not overtly problematic, those close to Gabby, like her friend Rose Davis, felt like there was something off about Brian and noticed some red flags. In fact, she witnessed Brian's controlling tendencies firsthand. One night, he hid Gabby's ID so she couldn't go out with Rose to a bar. Additionally, she recalled many nights that Gabby stayed at her home just to avoid Brian. As she told the Daily Mail, he's got these jealousy issues, and he struggles from what Gabby called these episodes, where he'd hear things and hear voices and wouldn't sleep. Rose and Gabby, like many close friends, also shared their location via an app on their iPhones, but when Brian found out, he made Gabby delete it. She elaborated, "He had this composure as a sweet, nice, caring guy, but you could tell he's a little off, a little weird. Like he'd set up our hammocks when we'd go to the beach, but wouldn't sit with us, which I found bizarre." The couple had always been interested in traveling, embarking on an extensive road trip to the West Coast during the first year of their relationship. By the end of 2020, Gabby purchased a white Ford Transit Connect van that could function as a camper during long road trips. Their next adventure was planned for the summer of 2021, so in June, the pair packed up and left Florida. After staying for a few weeks with Gabby's family in their hometown, she and Brian left the East Coast in early July, stopping at various landmarks and national parks across the United States. Though their location frequently changed, Gabby was consistent in posting to social media and regularly updating her friends and family on their travels via texts and phone calls. When Gabby and Brian reached Utah during the second month of their trip, tensions between the two reached a boiling point. On August 12, 2021, Gabby and Brian were pulled over in the small town of Moab after a 911 call reported him slapping Gabby before the two of them drove off.
Hi, I'm calling. I'm right on the corner of Main Street by Moonflower, and we're driving by, and I'd like to report a domestic dispute. Florida with a white van, Florida license plate, white land. We drove by, and the gentleman was slapping the girl.
He was slapping her?
Yes, and then we stopped. They ran up and down the sidewalk. He proceeded to hit her, hopped in the car, and they drove off.
Witnesses were able to provide dispatchers with a description of the white van, and the vehicle was located by law enforcement driving erratically near the entrance to Arches National Park. Once stopped, officers approached the car and encountered a sobbing, nearly hysterical Gabby and a very tranquil Brian.
I have really bad OCD, and I was just cleaning and straightening up the back of the van before, and I was apologizing to him and saying, I'm sorry that I'm so mean, because sometimes I have OCD and sometimes I just get really frustrated. Not like...
She had her cell phone in her hand, that's why I was pushing her away, just because she wanted I locked the keys so I could walk away. I said, let's just take a breather and let's not go anywhere, let's just calm down for a minute. She was getting a little worked up.
Knowing what ultimately happened to Gabby makes the footage even more difficult to witness. Additionally, a selfie later recovered from Gabby's phone shows her distraught face marked with scratches and blood. According to metadata, the image was captured just before the couple was pulled over. The officers, despite reports from witnesses on the 911 call and Gabby's facial injuries, incorrectly identified Gabby as the aggressor and missed glaring signs of domestic abuse. The two, as noted in the recording, were separated for the night, with Brian checking into a local motel and Gabby staying with the van. 1 week after the police stop in Moab, Gabby and Brian posted their first video to YouTube under the moniker Nomadic Static. In a 7-minute montage of the couple's journey so far entitled Van Life, Beginning Our Van Life Journey, the two appear happy, in love, and excited about the future. However, behind the scenes, Brian was not supportive of Gabby's social media aspirations. 2 days before the video hit YouTube, on August 17th, Brian took a flight from Salt Lake City, Utah, back home to Florida. Gabby stayed behind with the van at a hotel in Salt Lake. Reportedly, his week-long trip home was meant to pick up supplies and close out a storage unit so the couple could save more money, as they were considering extending their road trip. The public has since questioned the true purpose of this trip. Nevertheless, on August 23rd, Brian returned to Utah, and the following day, the couple was seen checking out of the Fairfield Inn & Suites Hotel near the Salt Lake City airport. On August 25th, Gabby called her mother from the road, updating her on their plans to head north into Wyoming and visit the Bridger-Teton and Yellowstone National Parks. On the same day, Gabby made her final post to Instagram, though some question if her last posts were uploaded by her. The captions were strange, with friends indicating that it didn't quite sound like Gabby, and the final 2 posts were lacking a location tag, something that she almost always included. 2 days later, around 1 p.m., the pair were seen at Merry Piglets Mexican Grill in Jackson, Wyoming, a small town on the outskirts of Bridger-Teton National Park. Brian was aggressive and loudly argued with members of the waitstaff before leaving. A tearful Gabby returned shortly, apologized for his behavior, and left again. They were captured on CCTV footage at a nearby Whole Foods, leaving around 2:30 p.m. This would be the last time anyone saw Gabby alive. That same day, Nicole received an odd text from her daughter. It read, "Can you help Stan? I just keep getting his voicemails and missed calls." On the surface, it seems innocent enough, but the Stan in question was Gabby's grandfather, who she never would have referenced by first name. The final communication from Gabby's phone to her mother's came on August 30th, when Nicole received a text that read, "No service in Yosemite." Nicole, already concerned, was doubly confused by the message. Gabby had previously told her that Bridger-Teton and Yellowstone were their next stops. Yosemite National Park is almost 1,000 miles southwest in the state of California. This would have been a huge deviation from Gabby and Brian's previously stated plans. To make matters worse, Nicole tried to contact her daughter with no success. When Gabby didn't answer, she moved on to texting Brian and his parents. All the Laundries refused to speak with Nicole. Gabby was missing. Witnesses saw Gabby's white van parked at the Spread Creek Dispersed Camping area in Bridger-Teton National Forest between the 26th and the 28th of August, and one woman even remembered a young, generic-looking white man behaving oddly around the vehicle. The next time Brian was spotted by witnesses was on August 29th when a young woman and her boyfriend saw him hitchhiking on the road near Coulter Bay Village around 6 p.m. They picked him up and he offered them $200 to go to Jackson, Wyoming. They accepted, but less than 30 minutes into the drive, he became upset when he realized the pair were headed to a different part of town than he had hoped. As a result, Brian became agitated and exited the vehicle. Minutes later, another woman picked him up. He asked to be taken to the entrance of the Spread Creek Dispersed Camping area and offered to pay for gas. He seemed visibly nervous and insistent about not going any further than the campsite entrance. That same day, Brian made a series of frantic calls to his parents, Roberta and Christopher. While their previous conversations had been unremarkable, Brian now seemed distressed, telling his father, "Gabby's gone." Immediately following the disturbing conversation with his son, Christopher phoned the family's longtime attorney, Stephen Bertolino, and retained his services. Phone calls between Brian, his parents, and his attorney continued into the night on August 29th, with Bertolino reportedly advising Brian to remain in Wyoming so they could secure legal representation within the state. However, against Bertolino's advice, Brian hopped into Gabby's white Ford Transit Connect and began the multi-day drive back towards his parents' Florida residence. Meanwhile, the Petito family, growing increasingly anxious about Gabby's lack of communication, continued reaching out to the Laundries, but their inquiries were met with silence. By September 1st, Brian and the van were back in Florida, with the Petito family none the wiser. About a week after Brian returned, the Laundries ignored the Petitos' continued pleas for assistance and instead embarked on a camping trip to Fort DeSoto County Park, about an hour and a half away from their residence. Finally, on September 11th, roughly 15 days after Gabby was last seen, Nicole filed a missing person report for her daughter. Brian was quickly identified by law enforcement as a person of interest, but he and his parents maintained their silence. This reclusive attitude became harder to explain as the case gained public interest in the days that followed. Gabby's whereabouts became the concern of internet sleuths everywhere and dominated the headlines for weeks.
The nation is searching for Gabby Petito, but her boyfriend Brian Laundrie is not.
On September 13th, Brian was seen by a surveillance team leaving the family home in his Ford Mustang. 2 days later, the car returned, and police assumed the driver to be Brian. However, on September 17th, the Laundries reported their son as missing, claiming to have not seen him since he left home on the 13th. It was later revealed that the person seen bringing the Mustang back to the Laundrie residence was Roberta, and the police had mistaken her for her son. The search for Gabby was massive, involving 5 different law enforcement agencies combing the Grand Teton National Park for 8 days. Sadly, on September 19th, the search was concluded when remains were discovered and positively identified as those of Gabby Petito. Found at the Spread Creek Dispersed Camping area, her body was located a mere 5-minute walk from where her white van was last seen by witnesses during the final days of August. An autopsy confirmed that her death was caused by blunt force injuries to the head and neck and manual strangulation. Amid this heartache, Brian remained missing. His parents were completely silent on the matter, refusing to engage with law enforcement or the press, though search warrants were executed to gather evidence from the Laundrie family home.
Where's Gabby? Laundrie! Where's Gabby? Where's Gabby? Officer, can you give us an update?
Officer, can you tell us why you're here? Officer, can you tell us why you came here to Brian Laundrie's house? What do you know?
In early October, Brian's father joined the ongoing search for his son, urging authorities to look in the T. Mabry Carlton Reserve and the nearby Myakkahatchee Creek Environmental Park, both areas Brian was known to frequent. Skeletal remains were ultimately found on October 20th at Myakkahatchee Park in an area that had previously been underwater. Dental records confirmed that the skeleton belonged to Brian Laundrie, who had died from a self-inflicted gunshot. It is worth noting that there is a popular conspiracy theory that claims Brian is not dead and remains at large. There is no evidence to substantiate these claims at the time of recording. Alongside Brian's body, a dry bag containing a journal was found. Within its pages, Brian admits to taking Gabby's life, claiming that she had fallen and hurt herself, so he chose to mercifully end her suffering. In his words, "I ended her life. I thought it was merciful, that it was what she wanted, but now I see all the mistakes I made. I am ending my life not because of a fear of punishment, but rather because I can't stand to live another day without her." Naturally, experts disagree with Brian's account of events, since it simply does not match up with the forensic evidence. Unfortunately, the only two people who know the truth no longer walk the earth. Shortly after the discovery and identification of their daughter's remains, the Petito family launched the Gabby Petito Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting efforts to locate missing persons and help victims of domestic violence. Even though it has been almost 3 years since the couple's ill-fated trip, haunting bits of their story continue to appear. In June 2024, the FBI released over 350 pages of documents related to the case. Among the papers was a heartfelt, undated letter from Gabby to Brian that begged him, quote, "Just please stop crying and calling me names, because we're a team and I'm here with you." On July 1st, 2024, SB 1224, colloquially known as the Gabby Petito Act, went into effect in the state of Florida. This requires law enforcement to look more closely at allegations of domestic violence and conduct assessments in certain circumstances to determine if the victim is at a high risk of injury or death. The legislation was championed by Gabby's father. The sad reality is that Gabby's death might have been prevented if the red flags visible to those around her had been interpreted with more urgency. Though Brian seemed decent to many, including Gabby's mother and father, others recognized the bubbling toxicity in the relationship. Her friends expressed misgivings. A female park ranger who witnessed the incident in Moab warned her that their relationship was unhealthy, and even one of the police officers who stopped them that day revealed that he did indeed see Brian as a mental and emotional threat to Gabby. Often, many people in these types of relationships cannot see what others do. More education and resources are needed to help individuals recognize the warning signs and leave before it is too late.
I just hope that people are inspired by her. It's hard to put into words, but it means a lot to me that she's touched so many lives already, and this is only 2 weeks into it, and I'm so proud of her for doing this, and we're going to keep it going. Like you said, keep the light going and help a lot of people if we can.
And will the foundation